You're just a mechanic." The CEO mocked the single dad pointed to the jet. "I designed it." Bertram Voss had exactly 6 minutes before the press conference that would unveil Halcyon Aerospace's newest private jet, the Meridian Vevin, and he was spending those 6 minutes doing what he did best, finding someone to blame for a problem that had, until 40 minutes earlier, threatened to derail the entire launch. "You're just a mechanic," she said, loud enough to carry across the hangar floor, pointing dismissively at the man in the grease-stained coveralls standing beside the aircraft, a worn leather portfolio tucked under one arm. Cameras were already rolling nearby, journalists gathering for the reveal. And Bertram, no correction, Serena Voss, the CEO, whose name would be on every headline that afternoon, needed a story that made her look competent, rather than lucky. Now that the last-minute technical scare had been resolved, "I don't have time to explain engineering to maintenance staff right now," Serena continued, addressing the small crowd that had gathered, half amused, half uncertain what they were witnessing. "This man patched a fuel line issue an hour before launch. That's appreciated genuinely, but let's not pretend he understands what this aircraft actually is." The man in the coveralls was Elias Bram, 43 years old, a single father raising his 12-year-old son Otto alone, since a divorce 3 years earlier had left him with primary custody and a schedule built entirely around Otto's school days and soccer practices. He worked maintenance and final inspection duties at Halcyon Aerospace's manufacturing facility, a role he'd taken 2 years ago after leaving his previous position. One Serena Voss, in her 18 months as CEO, had apparently never bothered to learn anything about, because she'd inherited Halcyon's engineering leadership structure from the company's previous founder, and had spent most of her tenure focused on marketing, investor relations, and public launches like this one, rather than the actual technical architecture of the aircraft she was unveiling. Elias set the leather portfolio down on a nearby cart, unhurried, and opened it to a page near the middle, a set of original structural drawings, hand-annotated, dated 11 years earlier, bearing a signature at the bottom corner that matched exactly the name stitched onto his coveralls. "I'm not just a mechanic," he said, calm, without raising his voice to match hers. "I'm the lead structural engineer who designed the wing architecture and fuel system layout for the Meridian platform. 11 years ago, back when this company was still called Aldrich Aeronautics, before Halcyon acquired it. I stepped back from the design floor 4 years ago, after my divorce, because I needed a role with predictable hours to actually raise my son. Maintenance and final inspection gave me that. It didn't erase what I built." The hangar went quiet in the specific way rooms go quiet when a confident assumption suddenly collapses in public. Serena's father, Aldrich Voss, the company's founder and chairman emeritus, standing a few feet away with a tablet in hand, went very still, recognition dawning slowly across his face. "Elias Bram," Aldrich said almost to himself. "You're the one who solved the wing loading problem on the original Meridian prototype. I remember your name from the engineering reports. I thought you'd left the company entirely." "I left the design floor," Elias corrected, "not the company. When Serena's team called for extra maintenance hands to cover today's pre-flight inspection, I was on the schedule. I noticed the fuel line issue, because I know exactly what that system is supposed to look like. I designed it. Nobody else on today's maintenance crew would have caught it in time, because they weren't looking at the aircraft the way its original engineer looks at it." Serena's composure faltered. The confident dismissal from a few minutes earlier, now sitting visibly, uncomfortably, in front of a hangar full of journalists, who'd clearly caught every word. She glanced at her father, then back at Elias, doing the rapid mental recalculation of someone realizing the story she'd been about to tell the press competent CEO catches maintenance oversight, saves the launch had just been replaced by a considerably more embarrassing one. "I didn't realize," she said, quieter now, some of the performance draining out of her voice. "Nobody told me who was on the maintenance crew today." "Nobody usually asks," Elias said, not unkindly, but without letting her off the hook either. "That's sort of the point. I've spent 4 years being introduced as the mechanic, by people who never looked past the coveralls to check the resume underneath. It didn't bother me much, honestly, until you decided to make it a talking point in front of a room full of cameras. Aldrich Voss stepped forward, visibly working to repair what his daughter's assumption had just done to the company's credibility in front of the exact press corps they'd assembled to Project Competence. Mr. Bram designed the core structural system this entire aircraft is built on, he said to the gathered journalists, his tone deliberately corrective. The fuel system he caught this morning, the wing architecture underneath this jet. That's his work, from over a decade ago. If anyone in this hangar deserves credit for the Meridian de Veuve actually flying safely today, it's the man my daughter just called just a mechanic. The correction, delivered publicly and without hesitation, did more to salvage the moment than any amount of damage control could have managed afterward. Several journalists were already typing, and Serena understood, standing there in front of cameras that had captured the entire exchange, that this story was no longer going to be about the Meridian Vian's specifications. It was going to be about her. The press conference happened anyway, delayed by 20 minutes while Serena composed herself. But the coverage that ran that evening focused almost entirely on the moment that had unfolded before the formal presentation. Even began a CEO publicly dismissing a maintenance worker who turned OT to be the aircraft's original chief engineer, corrected in real time by her own father in front of assembled media. Industry commentary was blunt in its assessment, several outlets noting the irony of a leadership team seemingly unfamiliar with the actual technical talent working inside its own hangar. Aldrich Voss, in the days that followed, made a decision that mattered considerably more than any single news cycle. He formally reinstated Elias to Halcyon's senior engineering team, in a role structured at Elias's explicit insistence, around the same schedule flexibility that had drawn him to maintenance work in the first place, ensuring he never again had to choose between his career and being present for Otto. Serena, to her credit, didn't try to smooth over the moment with a scripted non-apology. She met with Elias directly, a week later, in a conversation neither of them made public. I made an assumption about you because of what you were wearing, she said plainly. That's on me. I'm not going to pretend it wasn't, or make excuses about the pressure of the launch. I appreciate you saying that directly, Elias said. I've spent 4 years being underestimated by people who never bothered to ask a single question before deciding what I was capable of. Most of them never had to say it out loud in front of cameras. That part was new. I'd like to do right by that, going forward, Serena said, not just with a title. With actually listening, before I decide what someone's worth, based on what they're wearing when I meet them. Elias returned to engineering leadership, eventually taking on a senior design role for Halcyon's next aircraft platform, all while never missing one of Otto's soccer games, a non-negotiable condition he'd made explicitly clear before accepting any promotion, one that Halcyon, chastened by the public lesson of that hangar floor, honored. Without argument, Otto, 12, and sharply observant, asked his father about the viral video everyone at school had apparently seen within days. Were you mad at her? Otto asked. The CEO lady, Elias considered the question honestly, the way he tried to answer all of Otto's. A little, in the moment, he admitted. But mostly, I was just tired of being seen as less than I was because of what I happened to be wearing that day. I designed that whole jet, Otto. Coveralls don't erase 11 years of work. I just needed someone to actually look. Instead of assume, Otto nodded, satisfied, already moving on to ask whether he could tell his friends his dad had designed an actual airplane which, Elias confirmed, smiling for the first time since that entire strange day had begun. He absolutely could. The end.